Once again, looks like we're live. Patrick Queally, your friend in the mortgage business, here with the Wicked Awesome Report. I'm your host, and my co-host is Declan O'Toole from SelectRE Estate. Good morning, Declan.
Good morning, Patrick. How are you?
I'm doing very well. So the Wicked Awesome Report, we broadcast this every Tuesday and Thursday at 10 a.m. or 10-ish, depending on our technical difficulties. It looks like we're right on time this morning. Got the live stream going without any issues. So today on the Wicked Awesome Report, we're going to have a little conversation, some back and forth. Let's talk about investment properties and becoming a landlord, some of the pros and cons, some of the things you need to watch out for and consider before you pull that trigger and sign that contract to buy the property. So obviously I'm going to focus on the financing end of things. And but Declan, you're certainly going to lean into that as well with some of the financial analysis from the buyer's perspective. You know, not just can it be financed, but is it a good investment? You know, do the numbers play out to be a worthwhile investment? I think that's a fair sort of tag team as to how we're going to attack it. Yep,
that makes sense. I mean, essentially my thinking is if you're looking at it, make sure you're hitting all the parameters and know exactly what parameters to hit when you're looking at a property, so you're comparing them side by side and see what a good property is versus another one. Sure.
So let's let me dive into some of the financing considerations. So when you're purchasing an investment property from a lender's perspective, that is a different category of risk as opposed to someone buying a home that they're going to live in themselves. Okay, so from a lender's perspective, it is a riskier transaction when you're buying an investment property. Now let's think about it from a logical standpoint. You know, Declan, if you know, you or I have investment properties and we have our own primary residences as well, and if we have some sort of a cash crunch, okay, we've lost our job or some impact to income, and we have to make a choice as to what bills are going to be paid. Well, I think that just about everybody is going to want to take care of their own primary residence, the roof that's over their own head first. And you're going to pay that bill first. And then if there's enough money left over or there's enough cash flow, you'll take care of the investment property or properties, you know, the bills on those. So from a bigger risk for the bank. Yeah, exactly. So from a common sense perspective, you know, a lender takes a look at that and says, yeah, okay, so it's an investment property. It stands a greater risk of going into default at some point. So to make up for that added risk, a lender is going to charge a premium on the interest rate. So it's going to be a slightly more expensive transaction to finance. And in most cases, you know, an investment property, you know, interest rate is about 0.5%, maybe 0.75% higher than a primary residence. So, I mean, it's not a whole world of difference, but it certainly is more expensive. And also to offset that risk, a lender is going to require a larger down payment. So you got to have more skin in the game. So if you're purchasing a single family or an individual condo unit as an investment property, lenders typically going to require 20% down. If you're buying a multifamily, and for a couple of minutes here, let's just stick to residential real estate, which is 1 to 4 units. So if you're purchasing a multifamily that is 4 units or less, lender's going to require 25% of the purchase price as a down payment. So compared to owner-occupied properties, yeah, absolutely have to have more skin in the game, and it is slightly more expensive to finance. And from a lender's perspective, that's really just to offset the inherent risk that comes along with that kind of collateral.
Patrick, quick question on that. Let's see then that this kind of speaks to the investment, I suppose, a little bit versus your own owner-occupied as well. Is, yep. What if you get a 2-family and you're living on the first floor and you've got the second floor as a tenant? How does that impact the...
Great question. So that is still considered an owner-occupied property because you are living in one of the units yourself. So with something like that, you can get all of the owner-occupied terms. You know, so potentially a lower down payment, potentially a lower interest rate as opposed to a pure investment property because you're living in one of the units yourself. Okay. Now, from a lender's perspective, there's still a certain amount of risk in that. Well, there's risk in anything, but with purchasing a multifamily, it's sort of that hybrid. Okay, so it's not a single family you're occupying yourself, but it's not a pure investment property. It's actually both. So you're living in one unit and you have a rental unit or rental units as part of the same property. Now, a lender certainly can, and in most cases will, consider the rental income from those other units to help you qualify for financing. And that's the case whether it's a purely an investment property or if you're occupying one of the units and renting out the others. So the standard rule of thumb is 75% of the fair market rent is what's going to be added to your income as a buyer to help you qualify. So why 75%? Well, Declan, as a property manager, and I know you have that as a line of business, there are certainly expenses that come along with managing a building, whether you're occupying it or not. So you're going to have vacancy, and as tenants move out and before new ones move in, you're going to have rent loss. So the current environment through the pandemic, I mean, there are certainly a number of people that just don't have jobs and don't have the income and can't pay their rent. So you as the landlord still have to pay your mortgage even if you're not receiving that rental income. Okay, so repairs and maintenance. So when a lender is analyzing a borrower's qualification to purchase that building, again, they will use some rental income, but only 75%. They're chopping 25% off the top to account for that vacancy, that rent loss, those repairs and maintenance. And that's a pretty common calculation, pretty standard, across the business, that it's 75% of the rental income that's added to your income to help you qualify.
Which is interesting because very often when you're analyzing a property to get an idea of what it's worth, typically you end up somewhere around 75% in terms of your numbers. That 25% is the cost. So.
Yeah, and I think that's, again, it's sort of industry standard, but it's not just an arbitrary number. I think that is a fair estimation of what it should be. And of course, every property is different. Some might be a little bit more, might be a little bit less, but I think it's a fair, estimation that 25% for expenses is where most properties are probably going to end up when you add it all up at the end of the day.
Okay.
So again, so you can use rental income to help you qualify. Now, one of the things that lenders quite often require, and I don't just look at it as a lending requirement. I'm not a financial planner, but with my financial planner hat on and that sort of line of thinking, is something that's called reserves. So again, with the inherent risk that's part of purchasing an investment property, a lender wants to make sure that you as the borrower have the financial means to be able to carry that property, especially in the event that you have tenants that don't pay or there's units that are vacant. So one of the financial requirements quite often is reserves. So what are reserves? It's money, liquid funds you have in the bank after you've attended the closing. So you've paid your down payment, you've covered all of your settlement charges, you're at the closing table, signing on the dotted line. Once all the money for that transaction has come out of your bank accounts, how much money do you have left over? Okay, when we talk about reserves, it's typically calculated in terms of number of months of mortgage payments. So when I say 6 months worth of reserves, you need to have 6 months worth of mortgage payments for that property in the bank. So if the payments are, easy math, your payments are $3,000 a month, after you attend the closing, you need to have at least $18,000 in the bank as liquid funds available. And from a lender's perspective, that's just cash available to get you through if in fact you do end up with some vacancies, some rent loss, whatever issues that are going on there. And as the owner of the property, even though you're not receiving all or any of the income from the tenants, you still have the financial capacity to make those mortgage payments by dipping into those reserves in order to to carry the building until you do have that cash flow again. So
otherwise known as a rainy day fund.
Well, exactly. Yeah. So again, thinking with my financial planner hat on, look, if you're purchasing an investment property, and realistically, you can get qualified on paper to purchase that, but according to your real life everyday budget, if the only way you can really make those mortgage payments every month is if you're getting all the rent from every tenant, I think you're skating on thin ice here. Okay. You should have some money, like I said, a rainy day fund. You should have some savings built up, because eventually a tenant's not going to pay. Eventually something's going to break. You need to have that cash to fall back on.
So it's interesting. So when I work with my clients to buy an investment property, and that can be anywhere from a condo to a single to 2-family, 3-family, and further up. We kind of use similar analysis, and a lot of it's based on, of course, one hand works with the other. When you start making this you look at these rates, and part of it, so we have keeping in mind essentially the likes of a reserve. So we look at expenses. We usually put in a 5%. It's industry standard 5% for vacancy rate. Usually about 2 or 3% for maintenance. If you got a property management, 5 or 6% for property management. Then you throw in your insurance. If there are condos, obviously condo fees, taxes. But then there's also, you throw in reserves, which is usually 2%. But that's also on top of the vacancy, maintenance, and management, etc. So I can see. So from both perspectives, you're looking at it from a banker's perspective. You're asking for those reserves. From a buyer's perspective, they want to make sure that the value is there, so they can take those hits on the expenses as well when they're analyzing.
So some interesting points there, Declan, in terms of analyzing the cash flow on the building from the investor standpoint. So I know that you deal a lot with larger multifamilies as well. So once you get above 4 units, even if all of the units in the building are residential, okay, they're apartments. Once you're 5 units or more, it's classified as a commercial real estate transaction. Okay. Right. And with those larger apartment buildings, the type of analysis you're talking about is more common when you get 5 units and up, because it is a commercial real estate loan that's needed to purchase that. And in general, the common reference to that is it's a commercial piece of real estate, even though all the units may be residential within that, under that roof, it's all, apartments. So it's interesting to me to see some people that are investing in real estate, and they're purchasing 2 or 3 families, 4 families, not hitting the what's truly defined as commercial space. And really all they're taking a look at, and again, I think it's the amateur version of it, the amateur analysis, all they're taking a look at is what's the mortgage payment, principal and interest, what's the real estate taxes, what's the insurance, and compare that to the rent that's coming in. Oh, okay, great. We're going to be profitable. Well, maybe not. You're going to have other expenses there. So if you're a property manager yourself, and you're going to take care of the snow plowing, and you're going to mow the grass, and you're going to fix the leaky faucet and the clogged toilet, and patch the roof, and repair replace the hot water heater, all well and good. But if you're building a real estate portfolio and you're buying multiple small properties like that, it's tough to do all that property maintenance yourself. And even if you are, there's a dollar cost associated with your time to go and make those repairs. And again, if all you're comparing is the rental income coming in to what the mortgage payment is, on paper it looks profitable, but in reality, you sit down with your accountant or your CPA or whoever does your taxes at the end of the year, and you analyze what you actually spent, not just in terms of dollars out of your pocket, but if you take a look at the time spent making repairs, may not be as profitable as you thought. And I don't say that to scare anybody off, just as a reality to think about it. Even if it is a smaller building, it's falling under the residential guidelines, 1 to 4 family. Declan, you're making a great point. You got to take a look at more than just what the principal and interest, taxes, and insurance is. You got to take a look at really what the net operating income is after all those other expenses. Don't approach it as an amateur. Be a professional. Put a couple of bucks away to take care of those replacement reserves. Yes, that hot water heater is going to need replacement in X number of years. Okay, and that may not be a big expense, but technically, you know as well as I do, when a hot water heater goes out, it goes out at the worst possible time. Yep. Christmas Eve.
1 a.m.
Yeah, 1 a.m. on Christmas Eve, and you're gonna pay a huge premium to get a plumber out there to fix a busted hot water heater on Christmas morning. Okay, so you got to have over and above the financial reserves a lender's gonna require. You as a professional, as a real estate investor, as a landlord, you got to budget for those items and put that money aside.
Well, interesting. Actually, you mentioned that the key word there was that the net operating income. So a good way to, again, they do it more on the commercial, but I think it's wise if you take a look at a cap rate, which is basically your net operating income, which is over what you pay for the property. If you can get those, again, it's kind of a case of getting a yardstick and seeing one property versus another one. Well, the net operating income over so net operating income is essentially your gross rents minus your expenses. Is your net operating income. That divided by what you pay for it. If you get that rate, that cap rate, and compare them property to property to property to property, you get a good feel for what's a better investment. But speaking of which, you're talking about the management and maintenance. For instance, in Boston, you won't get a very good cap rate. So the higher the cap rate is, that basically means that the higher the income is over what you paid for it. So for instance, if you go to, I won't pick a town, but let's say you go Metro West, you go further out to another city, you're going to see that the cap rates are much higher. They might be 16, 17, 20% versus your 5 or 6% in Boston. Mm-hmm. That's great. I've seen people go and invest outside of what's their comfort zone, which is most of the people are dealing with right now. Let's say you're in the city of Boston. I've seen them buy. You need to know that you've got your rents in. So it's great that you have this cap rate. It shows your income is great, but you don't know how much of a vacancy rate you have. You could have a lot of vacancies, and that's where it makes sense to actually have somebody. And then that's an expense, managing and maintaining the property.
Exactly. So again, the for those watching, the cap rate, capitalization rate, is basically how will I summarize it? A numerical evaluation of how strongly the building is cash flowing. Okay.
Before you pay your banker.
Exactly. Yeah. So the higher the cap rate, the more quote unquote valuable the property is. Okay. Not to say that a lower cap rate is not valuable, but cap rates are a good, like I said, a yardstick, a good measuring tool, but it's going to be different sort of location to location. Okay. So within Metro Boston, you might have a cap rate, as low as the high 4s up to maybe the mid 6s. As you move further away from the city, you're going to see cap rates that may be a little bit higher. So you have to. It's a good measuring stick for tolerance to risk as well. So typically, the lower cap rates, like within the city, you're going to have a strong performing building, okay, with rents coming in typically. Further out you get, we get some higher cap rates. At least my assessment of it is you're taking on some additional risk with those higher cap rates. So again, it's a measuring stick for a couple of different metrics.
Yeah, less demand for the supply too. In the city, typically rentals happen, but you get your choice of tenants.
It's supply and demand, the old economics rule, for sure. So it's interesting to see a real estate investor or a landlord or someone who wants to be a landlord that actually will apply those metrics to even the smaller building. Okay, to the 2 or 3 or 4 unit building. That really is a much more, I guess, professional way to analyze the cash flow, with a cap rate. And it shows that you really are taking it seriously as a business. You're analyzing all the numbers. Now, simply because the numbers do work or don't work that doesn't necessarily mean that you do or don't want to, pursue that property. There could be, something weird that's going on with that property, such as, the tenants have been there for 10 years and they're paying way below market rent because the current owner is just happy. He, building's cash flowing for him, and the property is just way under market rents. And working with you, Declan, that's certainly something that you can analyze and say, well, hold on a minute, we can, the cap rate on this is actually much better because, overall it's, $5,000 a month under what the fair market rent should be. Right. So it's analyzing what's there now, but also the future as to what you can turn it into. And for a lot of investors, that's a quick value play. Just by increasing the rents, they're increasing the value of the building.
Sometimes too, it's really a case of doing a little bit of work. Again, you look at you do quick build out. It might be as simple as refurb. You could spend some money redoing the kitchen, new appliances, reface the cabinets, bathrooms. Well, the obvious places, kitchens and bathrooms. You can upgrade those. Yep. You may also have a situation where you've got you count the rooms in let's say it's you may be able to get an extra bedroom in where there's a typical, for instance, Dorchester, just because you have the floor through. You got your dining room, living room. There's always the extra room that can be turned into a bedroom. Yeah.
So so the value play to rehab some of the units, heavy or light rehab. It might be just carpets and paint. Okay.
Lipstick on a pig, Patrick. That's what we call it.
Yeah, exactly. So a couple of coats of 3-inch paint cover everything up. Right. So you freshen up the units. Maybe you're going to attract a better client and a tenant, okay? And from a purely commercial standpoint, evaluating the building, from a commercial standpoint, the value of the building is dictated by the cash flow, okay? So if you have stronger cash flow, because you've rehabbed the units, you've freshened it up, you've taken care of all the deferred maintenance, you've gotten the units up to a higher standard, you can attract a higher quality client in a tenant who's going to pay fair market rent. You do that across a number of units, well, bam, you've increased the value of the building simply because you've repositioned what the cash flow looks like.
Yeah. And another thing, kind of getting back to, I suppose, a consideration is, for instance, why, if the cap rates are so low in Boston, for argument's sake, versus somewhere else.
Talk about that.
Well, I mean, I'm thinking just from a perspective, you don't always buy for the cap rate either. Part of it might be appreciation. You look at a property, you're looking at the neighborhoods, and you get a good feel for what has already, I suppose, gentrified, or where the values have gone up in properties. Very often you look at it, there's a wave, right? You time it right. In fact, if I can make an argument that in 20 years' time, if you'd looked at a property and you bought right in any market in Boston and you threw a dart at a dartboard that had a list of properties, you look like a genius in 20 years' time, because there's so much room for appreciation because of we've got
so sort of the old rule of thumb that used to be there with multifamily. So we'll take Dorchester as a good example, where we've got quite a number of triple deckers, 3 families. Okay, so the old rule of thumb used to be, well, if you can buy a 3 family and the rental income from 2 of the units, if that covers the expenses, the principal and interest, taxes and insurance, if 2 units will cover those expenses, the 3rd unit is pure profit, pure cash flow. That's a good investment. Okay, that's sort of
hard to find.
Old rule of thumb. I don't know that you're going to find that in today's market with today's prices. You're probably going to have to look quite a bit to be able to find that. Or do you think that's an easy find, Declan? I mean,
it depends. If you do some work to them, I mean, they're not. It's not as easy. That used to be the rule of thumb. Not so much. Again, you can go further out, and you're going to find that opportunity, but not really in Boston. I think a lot of it is too. If you're, again, I know we're kind of getting back to the capitalization rate.
Yep.
What's your money doing for you? If you're looking at, what are you making on your money in the bank? Was it 3-4%? You're looking for 6. If you're getting 6 and change in Boston, you're looking at a decent cap rate for a property. And that's kind of why people look at it. I think, but over time, you will see the values of, particularly in Boston, I've seen, you mentioned Dorchester. There were properties, you could have picked up properties for $300,000, $400,000 3-4 years ago that are going for $1 million plus right now.
Exactly.
So and again, it depends on which part, which neighborhoods, but
Yep. Yeah, and in any urban area like that, value, cap rate, it's going to be different neighborhood to neighborhood, and even a couple of blocks within the same neighborhood. You go a couple of blocks in any direction, and it's almost like a completely different market area that's going to command different values and different rents. So just another point to make there, if you are looking to be a landlord, approach it from a professional standpoint and make sure you have the right team around you. Okay, in terms of a mortgage lender, I'd like to be on that team, as well as a real estate agent like Declan, who is very familiar with the areas that you're looking to buy in, to not just sell you a rental property, but help you invest wisely in the right investment property in the right location. So landlording, just not for everybody. It is a good way to increase your net worth, okay, to increase your assets, but not everybody wants to deal with tenants, toilets, and trash. Okay, so that's why we have property management companies, and again, Declan, I know that's one of your lines of business. So as a property manager, put you on the spot here a little bit. So as a property manager, most people would associate that with a larger, apartment building, 5, 10, 20 units or something like that. But managing smaller investments, let's say an individual condo or a 2-family or a 3-family, some nuances. So number one, is that something you take on? And number two, what are some of the nuances or differences managing a smaller, investment as opposed to a 20-unit apartment building?
So I suppose part of it's economies of scale. So yes, we do. In fact, we have a number of people. I think it happens quite a lot. You buy a condo, your family gets bigger, you decide to move out to the burbs. Now you've got a rental apartment. So we do quite a few of those. We do everything from the individual condo to managing condo associations, which is a building, basically the condo building itself, to the 3-deckers, singles, 3-deckers, all the way up to 20 and change. The difference is, I suppose, economies of scale. First off, if you're managing an individual condo, you're dealing directly with that tenant. So the priority is making sure that everything within that unit is being taken care of, which is right down to, as you mentioned, everything from toilets to trash. It's just make sure everything's going okay. We always try to do an inspection, maybe twice a year, to go through the units just to make sure that there isn't running water that the tenant's not complaining about. Making sure that you're collecting the rents, but you're not necessarily dealing with the issues outside in the hallway or the greater issues, unless there's an issue between that tenant and someone else.
I see. Okay.
So if you're managing let's say it's a multifamily building, now you're dealing with the tenants, but you're also making sure that the curb appeal is taken care of, the maintenance, that the systems are being taken care of. So it's just a different scale.
And just, and maybe an oddball question, but managing, we'll say, a small, building, let's say 3 or 4 family, how often do you have to play referee to get between the tenants that, for whatever reason, don't like each other, or there's some sort of issue? Is that, do you play counselor as well? You get involved in those situations?
You do. I mean, that does happen. There's personalities. Maybe somebody has a dog. Maybe there's somebody leaves their stuff in the yard. There's a lot of small stuff you're taking care of all the time. Yeah. And it's interesting. Smaller buildings, you see it more than bigger buildings. Maybe it's because people are more anonymous.
That's what I would think. In sort of some of the smaller buildings, maybe those issues are more common.
Yeah, I think part of it is, in a bigger building, people are more anonymous. It becomes less of an issue individually between them. But certainly, yes, that 3 families, that we spend more time on a 3-family than we will on a 10 or 12 unit building. It's just, it is the nature of the beast.
Yeah. Yeah, so good fences make good neighbors, but I don't know how many good fences you can put up inside a 3-family.
No, no. I mean, I don't know. I've had, it seems to be it's in the 3 families it happens to, where somebody decides they're going to have a pool party and they fill up their 10,000 gallon pool with the water from the common areas.
Yes.
So we have a lot of that common area stuff that happens in the 3 family that you just don't tend to see in the bigger. I think it's, again, bigger numbers. I think it's policed a little better by their neighbors.
Yep.
Just that's
for sure. For sure. So I guess, landlording isn't for everybody. It is certainly a great way to grow your wealth, but if you don't want to deal with the tenants, toilets, and trash, there is a way to own real estate and not deal with that. But of course, hiring a property management company, sort of circling back to knowing what your numbers are and analyzing the property appropriately, you gotta, build out a cost for what that property management company is going to be. So it's either you're taking it on yourself and you're, dealing with whatever repairs and doing your property inspections and all that, or you're paying somebody else to do it for you. And I think that I see too many of the smaller, landlords and investors that are just starting out that, and maybe they can when they're just starting out. Maybe it's easy enough to do that when they've only got 1 or 2 or 3 properties. But for people that want to, build a portfolio, once you get beyond a couple of properties, it is a full-time job, and it gets to be time consuming. So if you're analyzing the numbers right up front, even if you're going to take care of that stuff, budget for it, okay, to pay yourself for the time and the materials that you're putting into it. But if you're budgeting for it and putting it aside, when you get to the point of hiring a professional property management company, you're not really putting a dent in your wallet or the cash flow because you've already budgeted and put that money aside.
Well, the other part of that is if you've got a good property management company, certainly if they do the leasing as well, they should be able to, part of that too is because they're in between, so they're dealing with the tenants can't go and beat up on the landlord. So when it comes to turning around and rents can be increased, there's certainly some efficiencies in the property.
So what you're saying is the landlord can prop you up as the bad guy.
100%. Yeah, we got bad cop. Or sometimes we'll go in and say, hey, look, the landlord, because now they don't have a relationship with them, right? So just doing my job, this is what's going on. But there's
sometimes it is easier with the middleman.
I
as a buffer.
100%. And then you're used to dealing. We as managers are used to dealing with tenants and different. We've heard every excuse under the roof. So so it's much easier for us to deal with it. Or it gets more personal with a landlord.
And I would tend to think that with a proper property management company, it's not just a monthly or annual expense. With the right company in there, they can actually save you money. They can identify some of the deferred maintenance items of what needs to be taken care of before it's an issue. They can help you screen out the tenants so you don't get, a bum in there that's not going to pay. Okay. So I think having the right property management company, yes, it is an expense, but I think in the long term, it's probably more of an investment than an expense. It's going to save you money.
In reality, Patrick, I think that, with few exceptions, they should be saving you money. That means above and beyond the fee, they should be saving you money because, again, you mentioned the preventive maintenance, catching, for instance, yes, tenants, they're watching. I know in our case, we check 1st of the month, 5th of the month, 10th of the month. We see what's not come in and we address it straight away. Mm-hmm. You may not see that because you're doing your day-to-day job, doing whatever it is that's taking up, a work and family, and then this becomes the secondary. So in our case, it's our primary responsibility to make sure that those funds are coming in and that we nip it in the bud if there's an issue with a tenant.
Yeah. All right. Great. So, I mean, if it doesn't come through, I think my thoughts are pretty clear. Even if it is a smaller investment property, I absolutely think that it's worthwhile hiring a property manager, if for nothing else, just peace of mind. I mean, we're joking about it, but sort of that buffer between you and the tenant, if there are issues, well, you can prop up the property manager as the bad guy. And maybe the property manager, dealing with a tenant puts you up as the bad guy. Landlord says X, Y, and Z, so this is what needs to happen. And it just creates a little bit of a buffer between you and the tenant. And sometimes, if you are too familiar with your tenants, that can lead to a bad relationship,
Yeah, I mean, my thinking is, you've heard the phrase mailbox income. In reality, you could set this up so that you have an apartment and you have everything set up, and you literally go online and you say, okay, here's what's going on. You get your check every month. Yep. And you're not dealing with any, so you basically get all of the privileges but none of the responsibilities, as long as you pay.
You make it sound too easy, Declan. Sign me up.
But it is easy, Patrick.
Yeah, no, it is. But you have to, in order to make it that easy, you have to have the right property that you've analyzed correctly and done the calculation, so you have the right cash flow.
Right. 100%. So coming back to, to try to bring it full circle, you have to analyze sort of, both sides of the page here. You have to analyze it from the lender's perspective and do the numbers work to be able to get mortgage financing on that building. Because I think it's few and far between, the buyers that have the financial capacity to pay cash for it. So there's going to be some, in the vast majority of circumstances, there's going to be some level of mortgage financing involved with that purchase. So you have to make sure that the numbers work from the lender's perspective. But simply because it works for the lender doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for you as the investor, as the landlord. You need to analyze it. And as we've talked about, it's more than just what the principal and interest, taxes, and insurance are. There are other expenses, and they may be once-off expenses. So you have to replace the roof. Well, yeah, that's a large expense, but if you are putting aside a small percentage of that rental income every month, when it comes time to replace the roof, it's not just this one huge one-time expense that now you got to figure out where the hell the money is going to come from to do that. You've been budgeting for it. Okay. So you got to have the right cash flowing property and know the numbers and budget for those things. And so another question for you, Declan, on the property management side of things, do you help your client budget and say, on average, okay, you should probably put, X amount away, sure, 2% of the operating income, and expect in whatever, maybe 7 years, 10 years, that roof is probably going to need to be replaced. And, do you take more of a proactive stance in telling the landlord what they need to prepare for? Yeah, we do. So we go around the property. But first off, going into it, if we're involved in the purchase, we always, again, it's kind of a tandem conversation with what you'd have with them is the reserves, putting money aside. We actually see the property initially and see what was involved. But let's say we come in halfway through, or even just as time goes on, because we go through and we do these inspections, we're always looking to see what the preventive maintenance items are. And so we're not necessarily watching their bank account, but we're telling them, look, we expect this to come up. This roof has, the useful life of the roof is another 5 years. We maybe could be ready to replace it, and expect that some repairs need to be done in the meantime. So we'll go through the whole property, and different things are expected to replace at different times. And we'll certainly stay on top of it and let them know what to expect, what the actual dollar amount would be expected, and when they can expect to pay it.
So another good point in terms of hiring a property manager. It's not just the day-to-day interaction with the tenant and collecting the rent. It's sort of the big picture, almost as a junior partner that's looking after you're paying them to look after the collateral and let you know what's going to need attention. So,
and they get up-to-minute reports. They'll see exactly how much rent has come in. They'll see what was paid, maintenance, etc. So we've got an online portal.
It's treated like a business.
It is a business. Yeah, it's our business. It should be your business.
Yeah. So when you're buying that investment property, it's it's a piece of real estate, but there are systems that can help you treat it like a business and manage that cash flow. And as a landlord, whether you're the first property that you're buying or the 50th property that you're buying, having these systems in place to analyze the property, make sure you're buying the right one, but also to manage the property all the way through, that's key. You can't, a lot of cases we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. You can't wing it. Hope everything's going to be okay. Hope is not a strategy. So
True. That's true.
All right. So we're hitting here, I think, about 40 minutes. So let's wrap it up. Unless you've got any other closing thoughts.
No, I think, Patrick, I mean, again, I think it's like most other things. It's know what your metrics are going into this, and that's everything from the knowing your locations, know what you want out of a property, whether it's appreciation, whether it's the cash flow, cap rates, etc. And then once you have it, make sure that you have some way of measuring, monitoring, and if it makes sense to have somebody else do that for you and take care of the property for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I hear you saying is, whether it's an individual condo unit or it's a large apartment building, you have to treat it like a business, and you have to know your numbers. And you have to keep an eye on those numbers. You can't just abdicate responsibility. It's still up to you to oversee it, but with the correct property management help, it becomes a hell of a lot easier to do that.
And the other thing too is it doesn't take very long for somebody. So certainly a new investor, this may all seem overwhelming. It's actually pretty straightforward. When you know your numbers and you've got a spreadsheet that breaks it down. I'm looking at one right now that has everything broken down on a particular property I'm looking at for somebody in South Boston. It's like it all makes sense. It doesn't. Again, this isn't rocket science. So so the person that's buying their first or the first couple of properties, it can seem overwhelming, but there's a science to it as well. It's not, there's an art to finding the right property in the right location, but analyzing it is a little bit more of a science, and maintaining that budget is more of a science. It's a spreadsheet. You can put all the numbers together and analyze it down to the penny. If you dot your I's and cross your T's, you should be in a good position.
Exactly. So I hear, sort of the bottom line here is, if you want to be a landlord, if you're investing in real estate, you need to treat it like a business, know your numbers. You can't just wing it. And knowing your numbers means both on the financing side, as well as, the cash flow, the actual investment side of it, your rate of return, what the cap rate is. You need to know all of those figures to know that it's a solid investment, because that's really what it is. It's an investment property.
Right. And I'm happy to work with anybody on that. If they want any help working out what those measurements are, more than happy to help them out. Whether they work
again, it's the length and depth of experience, years of doing it, Declan. You've certainly got the what the metrics are and can lay it out and explain it in a pretty simple fashion to anybody. So whole wealth of knowledge there, Declan. Thanks for helping and sharing. And if you are looking at investment properties and need some help analyzing the figures as to whether you think it's a good investment or not, the numbers don't lie. So give Declan a shout and have him help you analyze that property to see exactly what it can do for you, how well it's going to perform. So I think we'll wrap it up. Patrick Queally, your friend in the mortgage business here, is your host of the Wicked Awesome Report, joined by my co-host, Declan O'Toole from SelectRE Estate. Another edition of the Wicked Awesome Report. Run this every Tuesday and Thursday at 10 a.m. Please give us a comment, a like, a share. Head over to the Wicked Awesome Report Facebook page. Give us a like there so you'll be notified when new videos come up. And always looking for additional guests to come and join us. So doesn't have to be real estate centric. Really just looking for any business person out there that has a story to tell and would like to hang out with us for a little while here on a Zoom call and bring some attention to their business and just have a good time here. So we'll sign off, Declan. Thank you for joining me again today, and until the next edition of the Wicked Awesome Report, I hope everybody out there stays awesome. Take care.
See you all on Tuesday.
All right, let's stop the live stream here.